The sun was only just beginning to stretch over the horizon, washing the sky in pale apricot and lavender. Along the remote crescent of rocky coastline, the early morning tide was still low, exposing tide pools and patches of dark kelp that clung to the slick stone. The sea was unusually calm, so calm that the waves didn't crash, but lapped gently, as if unwilling to disturb the peace of the shoreline. A colony of seals had already begun their usual morning rhythm. Dozens of adults, scattered across the rocks, yawned, flopped, and snorted softly to one another. Mothers nudged their pups toward the water, encouraging them to swim, to learn, to grow. Gulls circled overhead, their cries echoing across the quiet cove and far offshore. The silver glitter of anchovy schools shimmered just beneath the surface. The scene was textbook, normal, predictable. But then, there was Koa, a young seal pup, barely weaned, small even for his age. He stood apart from the others, close to the edge of the waterline but not in it. His front flippers dug gently into the wet sand, as if holding his body in place. His head was low, his large dark eyes fixed unblinking on the ocean. His muscles, though not visibly tense, were frozen. His mother gave a soft bark behind him, nudging him again toward the water. He didn't respond. She tried once more, gently pushing her snout against his side, but Koa only shuffled forward an inch and then stopped. He made no noise. He didn't panic. He didn't cry out. But he wouldn't enter the water. On a cliff above the beach, nestled between a patch of hardy dune vegetation, two figures adjusted their scopes. Marine biologists, part of a coastal monitoring team, had been studying the seal colony for weeks. They were used to watching playful pups tumble into the surf, often recklessly, learning the joy and danger of the water in equal measure. But one of them, Doctor. Lila Brennan noticed Koa almost immediately. "Why is he hesitating?" she asked aloud, adjusting her lens. "His cohort's already in." Her colleague shrugged. "Late bloomer. Maybe still groggy," but Lila didn't look away. There was something different about his posture. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't disobedience. It was awareness. The pup wasn't distracted. He was locked on the water, watching, listening, sensing. She made a quick note in her logbook. 0604. Pup 17B, Koa, remains at shoreline, refuses entry. No visible injury. Body alert, eyes fixed forward. Unusual behavior. The waves touched his flippers. He didn't move. Everything else, the birds, the surf, even the other seals, seemed caught in that strange quiet that sometimes comes before something changes. And in that moment, on that calm morning, no one yet knew. The pup wasn't scared without reason. Something was coming. Koa hadn't moved in 7 minutes. To most eyes, that would mean nothing. But to Dr. Lila Brennan, who had spent the last 12 years studying marine mammal behavior along this stretch of coastline, 7 minutes of stillness at the shoreline from a healthy seal pup was too long. She lowered her binoculars and sat back on her heels, balancing her field journal against her thigh. The wind had picked up slightly, brushing fine sand across her boots and carrying the salty breath of the ocean up toward the bluff. "Still not in?" her colleague Erin asked, scanning the waterline. "Nope," she replied almost absently. "But it's not just that he's not moving. He's frozen, like he's watching for something." She lifted the binoculars again, the lens locked onto Koa's dark eyes. He wasn't looking at the other pups. He wasn't scanning randomly. His gaze was locked straight ahead, toward the open water. And there was something else. His whiskers were twitching, not lazily but rapidly, as if reading vibrations in the air. Every few seconds he blinked, but not in the sleepy way young pups often do after a nap in the sun. These were hard, fast blinks, like reflexes firing from something deeper than conscious thought. Dr. Brennan's pen scribbled quickly. 6:11. Pup's stillness persists. No vocalization. Whisker vibration noted. Orientation locked forward. Behavior suggests sensory fixation, not lethargy. Farther down the beach, 2 other pups had already entered the water. They splashed clumsily in the shallows, barking and rolling. A third pup slid in behind them. Their mothers followed closely behind. always watchful, always prepared. Koa's mother turned back once more, nudging him again, more firmly this time. He turned his head briefly to look at her, then looked back at the water. Still no sound. Still no movement. Down in the surf, a large adult bull slipped beneath the waves with barely a ripple. The water swallowed his body in a quiet gulp. But just as he vanished, Koa jolted, only slightly, but enough that Lila caught it through the lens. A twitch in his shoulder. His flippers curled inward. His body instinctively lowered, as if to brace for something unseen. She didn't like it. Not at all. Behind her, Aaron made a light comment, something about shy pups and stubborn personalities. She didn't respond. Instead, she stood up, shielding her eyes from the rising sun, and turned her gaze out toward the open water. The surface was calm. Too calm. No dolphins, no birds diving, no shoals of fish flashing in the sun. The reef zone, normally teeming with activity even in the morning, looked deserted. Her voice dropped a note. Something's off. There's no prey movement out there, not even gulls. Aaron frowned. You think he's sensing something? Lila didn't answer right away. She just looked back down at the seal pup, who remained in the exact same place, staring into the vast blue with the stillness of a statue. It wasn't hesitation, it was knowing, and it was starting to make her very nervous. The ocean surface glittered beneath the rising sun, soft waves lapping against the rocks in gentle repetition. To the untrained eye, the morning was serene, peaceful even. A clear sky stretched overhead, and the tide moved in with lazy calm. But beneath the calm, something shifted. Far offshore, near the edge of the kelp forest, shadows moved. Not the fleeting kind cast by fish darting through the weeds, but longer, steadier shapes. One passed low over the reef, then another just behind it, and then a third, broad-bodied, slow-moving, purposeful. There was no splash, no churn, no breach, just silence and movement. The sharks were coming. No warning preceded them. They were too quiet, too practiced. This was not the erratic sweep of a lone hunter, but the coordinated glide of a pod. They kept below the surface, out of sight, using the depth to mask their approach. Their presence didn't ripple the water or disturb the birds above. But something had changed in the rhythm of the reef. Small fish had vanished. The vibrant flashes of anchovies and mackerel, once visible just beneath the waterline, were gone. The seabirds, always the first to notice a shift in the food chain, had fallen silent. A cormorant skimmed low over the cove, but did not dive. A pair of gulls circled once, then veered inland. On the shore, the seal colony remained unaware. Mothers called to pups. Young seals barked and plunged happily into the water, splashing and tumbling in the shallows. The morning routine continued, ordinary and oblivious. Except for Koa. The pup still stood at the shoreline, his body rigid, his eyes fixed on the same stretch of ocean. He hadn't blinked in some time. His whiskers twitched, his ears swiveled slightly, but he didn't move forward. He didn't even sit. He stood braced, like something inside him refused to let go. No one else noticed the stillness in the water. The hunters below remained out of sight, drifting like phantoms through the green-blue world. But Koa had sensed them long before the scientists, before the flocking birds, before any sign reached the surface. He didn't understand what he felt. He had no words for it, no memory of such a thing. But instinct is older than understanding, and the fear in his blood was real. The ocean wasn't right, and he wouldn't go near it. From the clifftop above the cove, Doctor, Lila Brennan lowered her binoculars for the fourth time in as many minutes. Her brow was furrowed, her jaw tense. Something was wrong. She had spent the better part of a decade studying marine predator-prey interactions along this coast. She'd observed migrations, mating seasons, feeding frenzies, even strandings. She knew the patterns, how the water moved when seals fed, how fish reacted to sudden changes in current, how birds screamed before a predator surfaced. And this morning, the patterns weren't just off, they were absent. The reef was too quiet. Lila swept her binoculars across the open water again. No bait balls, no surface glint from anchovy schools, no diving birds. Even the cormorants that usually bobbed near the rocks were gone. She glanced back toward the shoreline. Koa was still standing at the edge, unmoved, silent. He hadn't taken a step forward in over 20 minutes. His posture was unchanged, alert, locked on the water, every muscle taut beneath his damp coat. Even from this distance, she could see the tension in his stance. Not lazy, not slow. Waiting. Her colleague Aaron sat nearby, casually scrolling through drone telemetry on a tablet. "Still watching the little guy?" he asked without looking up. Lila didn't answer immediately, then. "He hasn't moved. Probably just timid." "No," she said quietly. "It's not timidity. Look at the others. Same age, same week of birth. They're diving, playing, following their mothers." Aaron shrugged. "So he's cautious. Outliers happen." Lila didn't respond. Instead, she picked up her radio and pressed the call button. "Boat 1, this is Cliff Team. You seeing anything unusual on the outer edge of the kelp line?" A burst of static crackled through, followed by a voice. "Negative, Cliff. Visibility's clear, but sonar's weird. Lower bands are coming back muddy. Lot of movement, but spread out. No clear targets yet." Lila exchanged a glance with Aaron. Muddy sonar usually meant something big. Multiple somethings. Slow moving. Coordinated. "Try FLIR scan," she said. "Thermals might show something below." "Copy that." She turned back to the beach. Koa hadn't moved. His mother was now pacing in the shallow water, calling softly. He gave no answer. That was when she noticed the birds. The gulls were no longer circling overhead. They had moved inland, perched along the dunes, facing the ocean but staying grounded. And the pelicans that usually skimmed low across the surface were missing entirely. Even the waves had changed, just slightly. They rolled in slower now, more drawn out, like the water itself was holding its breath. She stepped forward, adjusting the focus of her binoculars once more. Her heart thudded slowly in her chest. This wasn't just an unusual morning. This was a signal. And it had started with a single pup refusing to enter the sea. It happened quickly, but not without warning. The first sign was a sound, barely audible but unnatural in the quiet rhythm of the cove. A splash, short and sharp, too sudden to be play. Then came silence. Heavy. Thick. The kind that presses against your chest and makes the world feel smaller. Lila's binoculars were already up before the splash had finished echoing. She scanned the shoreline. Koa still hadn't moved. He stood at the water's edge, completely rigid, while just a few meters away, one of the younger pups, brighter, bolder, had entered the surf. The juvenile had slipped past its mother with a proud bark, launching into the shallows with a flurry of flippers and foam. For a few moments it had splashed freely, diving and surfacing, twisting playfully in the cool water. Then, the ocean erupted. A burst of white spray exploded outward as something large surged just beneath the surface. The water foamed violently, thrashing and rolling. The young pup shrieked, a sound so raw, so sudden, that it seemed to tear through the air like a knife. On the cliff, Lila dropped her binoculars and grabbed the radio. "Shark strike! Near the reef mouth. One injured, juvenile seal, near shoreline." Aaron was already raising the drone, fingers moving fast across the controller. In the water, the pup scrambled toward the rocks, dragging its body through the shallows with terrifying urgency. Blood streaked the foam. Not much, but enough. Its side bore a deep slash. Not fatal, but close. It collapsed on the rocks, just short of the others, its mother rushing to shield it with her body. Panic rippled through the colony. Seals scrambled in every direction, some into the water, most back toward higher rocks. Mothers herded their pups behind them, barking frantically. The once calm beach was now a scene of chaos, and still, Koa did not move. He hadn't run. He hadn't panicked. But the look in his eyes had changed. He had known. Down below the surface, the truth was revealed. The sharks were no longer hiding. Their fins sliced the waterline now, long, dark, unmistakable. 1, 2, 3. Then more. A pod. They were coordinated, slow, and surgical in their approach. This was not random hunting. This was strategy. From the air, the drone feed showed a chilling pattern. Sharks circling the inlet like wolves surrounding a herd. The colony had been lucky. One pup wounded. But that luck had come only because one seal had not entered the water. Lila stood frozen, watching Koa. He hadn't looked at the injured pup. He hadn't looked at the sharks. His gaze remained locked on the ocean, as if he were still waiting for something worse. The ocean was no longer calm. In the space of minutes, everything had changed. Where gentle waves once curled across the shore, the water now pulsed with movement, unnatural, heavy, alive with presence. The pod had arrived in full. From the cliffs, the drone feed streamed back grainy but unmistakable footage, dorsal fins cutting the surface in synchronized arcs. One by one, they breached, then disappeared again beneath the waves. Some were close to the reef line. Others had already moved into the shallows, approaching the outer rocks where the younger seals often played. There were at least 14. Great whites, juveniles, and adults. Not scattered hunters, but a formation, deliberate, focused. This wasn't opportunistic feeding. This was coordinated predation, a phenomenon rarely observed this close to the coast. Rarer still with such timing. On the rocks below, panic had settled into a tense quiet. The seals had retreated. Mothers shielded pups. Injured juveniles lay behind clusters of bodies. Only the wind moved now, ruffling fur, stirring spray, echoing between the outcrops like a whisper of warning. Except for Koa. He remained rooted to the same spot. Upright. Unblinking. He had not once entered the water, even now when the threat had fully revealed itself. He stood apart from the others, not behind them, not beside his mother, but forward, still facing the sea. A sentinel. A question unanswered. Dr. Brennan's voice crackled through the radio, calm but clipped. Shark pod confirmed. 14 individuals. Flight team. Deploy decoy drone. Boat 1. Initiate sonar pulse to push them off the reef. Copy that. On the water, the response began. From the small tracking boat stationed offshore, a series of underwater pulses were released. Low-frequency vibrations designed to disrupt predatory coordination and scatter marine threats. At the same time, a secondary drone was launched, its shadow skipping across the waves like a seabird, drawing attention away from the colony. The sharks reacted. Some broke formation, darting toward the decoy drone with sudden bursts of speed. Others dove deep, vanishing from the surface. But not all of them retreated. A few remained, lingering, circling slowly, as if weighing their chances. The scientists on the cliff could only wait. Lila clenched her fists. She had never seen a seal pup predict a coordinated threat. She had read about dolphin alerts, elephant migrations, even bird silence before earthquakes. But never this. Koa hadn't warned them with sound or movement. He had done nothing. And yet somehow, that nothing had meant everything. He had known when the water was still. He had known when the others played. He had known before a single fin appeared. The drone buzzed above the surf, its battery draining fast. On the monitors, the pod finally began to disperse. One by one, the predators peeled off, slipping beneath the surface and out beyond the reef. Their visit had ended. But something had been proven here. Something rare. A young seal had sensed what science had not yet seen. By late morning, the cove had begun to breathe again. The sun had risen high, burning away the last of the coastal haze. The wind swept gently over the sea, rippling the water in soft, harmless waves. The reef shimmered once more in its usual turquoise glow, and the chaos of dawn felt distant, though not forgotten. The sharks were gone. No fins broke the surface. No shadows drifted below. The pod had scattered, slipping back into the deeper ocean, leaving behind only stillness and the thin trail of memory. The seal colony was cautious now. Mothers kept their pups close, herding them into tighter groups along the higher rocks. The injured juvenile rested, flanked by others, its wound cleaned by salt water and the tongue of its mother. No seals had died, but the trauma lingered in their silence. Koa still stood at the shoreline. Hours had passed since the first splash, the first scream. Yet he remained, a small figure against the vast blue horizon. His legs trembled occasionally with fatigue, but he did not sit. His eyes no longer showed fear, only certainty. He had never once looked confused, never once looked surprised. He had simply known. And now, he watched as the water returned to peace. Above, on the observation cliff, Doctor. Lila Brennan sat cross-legged beside her equipment, no longer scanning with instruments. Her notes lay untouched. The last entry had been made nearly an hour ago. Instead, she watched Koa, not as a subject, not as data, but as something older than research, a presence, a being rooted in the wisdom of the wild. Aaron stood beside her, drone controller limp in his hand. He had nothing to say either. There was nothing left to analyze. For all their technology, sonar, GPS, drones, tracking data, it had been the stillness of a single pup that had offered the first, truest warning. It hadn't cried, it hadn't run. It had simply refused. In that refusal was instinct. In that instinct, a message. Lila finally reached for her logbook. She opened it not to take data, but to write one final note. Caution is a language. And today, it spoke through silence. As noon approached, Koa slowly backed away from the shoreline. Not rushed, not fearful, just done. He turned toward his mother, who waited patiently on the higher stones. She didn't call to him. She only watched. He returned to her side without a sound, and the sea finally returned to stillness.